first of all, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Fabian, as you might have read. I work for the Linux Professional Institute in the position of Director of Certification Development, which means I'm in charge of what we are testing and the way we're testing it. I myself studied business information systems before I started to work for LPI. I did the LPI certifications, and besides I'm also writing a little. So that's about me, and that's about LPI. Who of you knows LPI? Okay, so what we're doing. We're basically doing certifications. It means we have a series of exams. You can do those exams, and if you pass them, you get a certificate saying, we believe in your Linux skills. So far, we're doing it for basic Linux administration, which means we have a consecutive program of 3 exams, all covering really Linux knowledge. It's basically the ops part of what DevOps stands for. We're doing it as a non-profit organization based in Canada, but we have affiliates all around the world, like, for example, Daniele from LPI Italy, and that way we offer support in almost all countries. We're independent from a vendor or any other organization, but we have a strong community. And all our efforts in developing those exams are community-based, which means we provide everybody who has an interest in our exams a possibility to participate in how we design those exams. And that's basically the reason why I'm today here to talk to you, to invite you to join this process and help us to develop this new DevOps certification. We're doing this since 1999, and so far we delivered more than 500,000 exams, which means we're not absolutely bad in what we're doing. So at least in certifying Linux administrators, we're doing quite well. But the question is, can we do it for another 16 years? What we're seeing recently, we see that, and that's good, Linux is part of more and more movements and technologies. Think about the cloud, about the Internet of Things, it expands. We see open source not only being part of the Linux context, we see it being used on other platforms. For example, Docker runs on Windows, which is great. At the same time, we see that more and more stuff companies used to do on their own is moved to the cloud now. Services are used from the cloud. Standard services are used less and less. Real administration tasks seem to be really required in order to develop and deliver an application. At the same time, while all this happens, we receive queries, why don't you do a DevOps certification? We receive several of these demands, so obviously people care about it. But just because people care about it doesn't mean it's really required. Because the question for us is, what are people actually doing? What do the people that get our certifications in their daily lives? So to find that out, we did a survey. We did it almost a year ago in spring and summer 2016, and we tried to find out what's the actual impact these movements take on what administrators are doing. We had more than 300 people doing the survey, and we had more than 250 free text comments, which is a lot for a multiple choice survey. And I brought 2 graphs with you that I'd like to share. This is a result of the question how important certain developments and movements are for what LPI is currently certifying. And if you see, those are the highest ranked ones. Automated administration is the top one. Cloud computing is following. Complexity, Internet of Things, mobile devices, and the fact that more and more jobs in the Linux environment require less and less Linux skills due to the use of advanced tools. So we have already here some of those terms that probably were also an integral part of all the talks that you had here. So a lot of the topics that you heard in this conference can be somehow summarized in those terms. This is the second question. We asked, what's the importance of certifications in certain markets and certain technologies? And you see that we have development ranking here, and DevOps, the term on its own, already is right behind development. So it seems to actually be something people care about. If we want to summarize it, a lot of people care about stuff like automated configuration, about containerization, version management, deployment stuff. And the same tools that are about to change what administrators are doing are also changing what developers are doing, because they care about the same tools and they have to somehow get used to the same technologies. So for what we are certifying, the typical Linux administrator, DevOps and development are topics that become more and more relevant, at least according to those statistics. We decided therefore to create an exam covering these certifications as some kind of add-on, what our typical Linux administrators can add to their portfolio to express proficiency in using the most prominent open technologies and open source tools that exist in this area. And interestingly, as soon as we announced it, we got the feedback, you can't certify DevOps. It's impossible to certify mindset. So what should we do with all this? People requesting and people saying we can certify it. It all seems a little complicated. So what we've been doing. First of all, we have a very, very, very large audience. It's not only the typical administrator who has to use those tools, it's also developers, it's administrators, it's developers, it's architects, it's basically anyone using this area. So if you want to create a certification that addresses all of these audiences, you can build it on top of a high stack of other certifications. Like you can't make it the top Linux certification you can attend after doing like 5 other ones. You also can make it the top development certification you can do after you attended a lot of them. So what we try to do with what we're currently developing and with what I would like to invite you to participate in, we would like to find out what people are actually doing if they work in a DevOps environment. And we would like to find which are the most important tools, given that they are free and open source, and create a test in using those tools. And we want to do it in a way that it's suitable for developers and for administrators, so that it does some kind of technical background, but in a way that it doesn't require you to have experience in Linux or in development for a long time, so you can add this as a building block to either of those existing qualifications. So, what we've done, I already told you about this initial survey we did, and also about this job test analysis that we did in order to find out which are the most important tools. And right now, we are discussing what should be on the exam. The real curriculum, the actual objectives that we're going to test. We have a draft on this. I will briefly introduce it to you soon. And I would like to invite all of you to provide feedback on this draft. What do you think? Is it right? Is it wrong? Are we missing something? Are we going in the wrong direction? Once we've done this, and we hope to do it in spring this year, we will finalize those objectives, and our hope is to be able to offer beta exams in summer and to be ready with the final exam release in fall of this year. So pretty tight schedule, and we're already in the middle of it. So according to those research and those studies that we did, our exam is probably going to have 5 main areas. It's software engineering, container management, machine deployment, configuration management, and service operations. It seems that in the area of software engineering, especially Git and Jenkins are very important tools that really everybody is referring. Same in container management. Docker and Kubernetes seem to be those 2 tools most people actually demand. Packer, Vagrant, Cloud Init are also prominent. And in the area of configuration management, where usually people always talk about Ansible, Chef, and Puppet in one sentence, it seems that Ansible is the one that most people, at least those who attended our survey, would like to see in this exam. So, given all these major topics, the question is, in case you're working in one of those areas, either being developer, being an operator, being a teacher, what's your opinion on this? Do you see the same technologies becoming more and more relevant? Do you see those tools? Do you see other tools? Do you think it's a good idea to somehow certify people and being able to use these tools? If you have an opinion on this, I would really like to invite you to go to this website. You will find a very comprehensive version of this draft there with all the details. And you will also find a link where you can join our exam development mailing list, where we discuss these things. But first of all, I would like to, talk to you as you're present here, to basically let you share and discuss your observations and also what you think about the results of our study. So is it something that you see in your daily lives too? Is it something that seems to be somehow decoupled from what you're seeing? So what's your opinion on this? If you'd like, we have a microphone I could pass on. If you have anything you would like to share to us. Anybody interested? Questions, thoughts, opinions? No one?
Well, if no one else there to speak up, then I'll have to do it. So, I have mixed feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I'm schizophrenic.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I hate certifications, and I love certification. So the reason why I hate certification is that I've seen so many, and I don't know LPI, I've seen so many certifications that are empty of contents, or that are done for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be ISO 2000 or whatever certified to get a contract. You get the certification, it's a piece of paper, no one cares about it, no one follows it. I love certification. I'm a university professor. That's what we do with our students. At the exam, we certify that they know what they are supposed to know. And then we sort of get back to your question. Is this what we want to certify? Is that what we want the people to know and to be able to do? And of course, as a university professor, you expect me to say no. So I'll say no. I don't care about tools. I care about concepts and principles. At one of the presentations this morning, there was one of the presenters who said that only diamonds and legacy is eternal. So today's hot tools will be tomorrow's legacy. And if we don't know why we're using these tools, what we're using them for, then when we get our certification and half a year from now we don't pick up Ansible, we pick up another tool, what will we do then? So, and we have to start much earlier than that. So I would ask you, what is DevOps?
It's a very tough question.
Yeah, and if I ask 10 people, I'll get 8 different definitions. And that's one of the problems. When I talk to people about continuous delivery, continuous deployment, continuous integration, DevOps, then it's one big mess. So I think that, well, I come from software configuration management, and we got our problems about terminology. But I mean, our problems are water compared to what's in this continuous delivery DevOps community. So I mean, you talk to some people and they say DevOps, it's a mindset.
Yeah.
And you can certify mindsets. You can have exams in mindsets, whether people can get into the mindset, understand the reason behind the mindset, and what are the concepts and principles of a mindset. So that's not an argument against the certification, that DevOps is a mindset. Other people will say, well, DevOps is a technical thing about constructing a continuous delivery pipeline or whatever, the DevOps pipeline. So there's sort of confusion about the terminology and what exactly it is. So that's probably step number 1. What is DevOps? Step number 2, why are we doing DevOps? So your certification should also try to certify that people actually understand what's the bloody point of doing this. Because unless you don't know why you're doing things, then it's like Italian people, they know why they're doing things. And that's why Italian people, they are so good at not following the rules, at improvising. Because we always have to improvise. But if we don't know what is the objective, if we don't know why we're doing things, then it's difficult to improvise. Because then we just do something and we don't get anywhere. Then the next step obviously is, on my paper it says, the concepts and principles of DevOps. What are the main things in DevOps? And then it says, as the 3rd or 4th step, no tools. Could you back up a little bit on your slides? to the slide that you don't want me to see again, the one with all the tools.
The one with all the tools, this one. Yeah.
So this says that you need to know something about software engineering, something about containers, container management, and machine deployment. I wouldn't call this configuration management, it's sort of configurability or whatever. And we have a problem with terminology again for this because it's not unique. Service operations, I would remove the tools and try to see what is it that you need to know about software engineering, what is it that you need to know about container management and why we're using containers and what they're good for. And then my paper says, after no tools, exclamation mark, it says, and then a lot of practical examples to solve. Because it's only at university that you can excel by pure theory. When our students, they go out there, they have to do things. My students, they have to pick up a version control tool, Visual Source, say for Git or whatever, and start using it. And if that's the first time, they're going to have problems. So, given that we have examined them in the concepts and principles, we should also give them some practical tasks.
Yeah. Well,
of solving, and then that's where the tools come in. But I would be a little hesitant to focus too much on specific tools. But then I've never been part of a certification, so I don't know how easy or difficult it is to leave it sort of open. That how would you solve this using Docker and Kubernetes or something else?
Well, first of all, it's hard to make a comparable and somehow objective certification without having somehow a very individual grading of this. If you are, for example, at university and you're able to really somehow assess different examples, different things people build, you can leave them a lot of freedom because you always can dig into those things. What we're doing here is a little different because we're doing it at large scale, so we need some kind of standardized way to evaluate it. And there are in fact several approaches to this. One is exactly the one you mentioned, go for principles, go for mindsets in that case, go for people really understanding what's happening in there. The way why we went into all those tools is, first of all, we would like to certify the people in actually using tools. That's what all our other certifications are doing too. We're not certifying them in, for example, knowing how our operating system works. We certify them in using Linux. And for the same reason, we go a little to this slide. You see that the title is DevOps Tools Engineer. So we have an explicit tools in here to stress we certify the people in being able to use tools and the most prominent open source tools you can use to implement DevOps. And given that you said that you can use this to implement a certain approach to doing DevOps, you can see it the other way around. If you want to introduce DevOps to an existing team, you might, of course, tell them all the theory, but it doesn't mean people are actually doing it. If, on the other hand, you give them something to do, like, for example, tell them, okay, here's a list of tools, play around with those tools. It's something that attracts engineers a little more than knowing something about a mindset. So just getting started in using these tools and making a few experience might lead people to the idea, okay, I use this tool, but why don't I ask my developers or why don't I ask my operators in order to have fine-grain something? And that's actually the beginning of DevOps because I somehow start to collaborate in a certain way. So if you take it a little apart from the pure academic thing to more or less a tool that also companies could use in order to implement it, there might be a use case to certify tools. And especially when you try to somehow get started with it, having a list of tools that you can learn and that you can use to implement by following best practices and by following what's demanded on the market, you actually have some kind of tool to implement this. And from the other perspective, having these detailed objectives, these detailed curriculums, is something people seem to like about RPI. We receive a lot of feedback that the actual product isn't a certification, but it's somebody who somehow works out of all those tools what's the relevant ones and what's the less relevant ones. So it's more or less two different approaches, and it might in fact be interesting to have a complementary thing, testing all the mindsets, or even having some kind of practical projects if you're able to evaluate them. And again, if you have students and you give them the task to somehow build something, they might need some orientation, which are the right tools to choose. And this might be a start to somehow get an idea on this. So
I'm aware that it's a tool, whatever, and that and that DevOps is very much about tools also, because you get into details when you actually have to implement these things that if you're not used to working with this kind of tools, then you have absolutely no idea how to go forward. And you were asking for feedback.
Yeah.
And I gave you my feedback.
Sure.
And I'm in the fortunate situation that I don't have to implement my own ideas. So that's no problem.
Yeah. But
I also think that the ideas that I sketched are suitable for a university. They are most probably not suitable for certification. Certification of many people, and especially when you have tool engineer in the certification title. There I would go more for the idea to say, well, you need to have some a lot of practical aspects. Still, I think that you should listen a little bit to my ideas. You should reflect a little bit on them.
Of course.
And see if you could get a little bit of that
well,
into it.
in fact, we will have a little bit in here. For example, in this architectural part, we will also have some things about knowing why DevOps is happening, for example. The same as in this IT operation part, this is somehow the complement to this one. So whoever does a certification, we want them to understand how does software development work in general, and how do IT operations work in general, so that there is a mutual understanding on what are the main concerns of the other party, so to say. But you're right, we should have it in there. We have those two areas where we would like to cover it. And I mean, if you would like to give it one more try, we have the full, very detailed version online, so you can see how much there's actually in there. But as a question for interest, you're teaching configuration, whatever the right word is in terminology. How do you assess your students? Like, do they actually have to do some kind of practical test, or? No.
Well, they do some part of it. They do by computer labs, mass based. But otherwise, they have an oral exam in group where we discuss problems around configuration and how would you deal with this situation. And then if I change the context slightly in this way, so it becomes a distributed team instead of a centralized team, how would that impact your solution?
That's a very, very pleasant way to assess people compared to the way that you really have to write it down in advance, and you can somehow interact with them. And in fact, this direct way of interaction is probably the best way to somehow assess it, because you can really test the people and how do they react to certain things. But it's nothing that works on a scale, or nothing that.
So I'm sure that certification like this will need to have a strong technical aspect, so that means that you have to have tools in it. But I think that you should consider, for instance, what happens to the bullet configuration management if the tool Ansible half a year or 2 years from now is not the hot thing.
It actually depends.
Could you pull it out and plug another tool in and still have sort of the same?
We actually can, and we review our certification every 2.5 years. We do the same community consultation again in order to really follow up with what's happening on the field. We've been pretty slow in doing this. We're getting up to speed now, and for this certification, we're absolutely aware that we have to review it, and that we also probably have to change it in a little while, because, as you say, it's a moving target and it's hard to somehow write it down. But at least from what we saw today, this is basically what most people would like to get somehow at least started with or be aware of.
I have a quick feedback that I have to go. And my feedback is, please don't call it DevOps certification, because it seems a little bit confusion between automation and DevOps. I suggest you call it automation engineer certification.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
And
even though,
for example, we have positions open for DevOps people,
Mhm.
and we call it automation engineer.
Mhm.
Okay, it's
And-
my feedback.
And even with those Storm DevOps tools, you don't think it's appropriate
The
to
tools
call
are the same, but
Mhm.
the DevOps word is a bad word in this case, because the community don't like, you never understand, because the mindset is automation engineer certification.
anyone else?
Hi.
Hey.
I work for a company that does training and coaching for agile teams.
Mhm.
And some of the objectives and the problems you illustrated with this program touch some of the problems that we have in the agile world for certifications. And we have the same conundrum, you know, do you have to certificate the mindset? Is it something useful for the industry, or is something that boxes in people and actually goes against the very nature of the thing? So yeah, no, I understand the problem. For example, when you say you cannot certificate DevOps, like you cannot certificate Agile, most of the certification are, for example, for Scrum, which is a more organic thing on top of Agile.
Yeah.
Even saying that, we try to, and for what I understand, the Scrum Alliance tries to step away from teaching too much of tools or mechanics of certain things, and try to get into the mindset and try to give an overview of what is that style of working, basically. So I think that this kind of certification may work and may also be useful if tries to send people in the right direction about thinking about the job and the way they automate their work and they look at the things they already do, and on top of that some tools, because people like to have something ready as soon as they go out of the room, real or virtual, after certification. But yeah, I see a lot of connections with what we are doing in the Agile world, and of course DevOps has a lot of connections with an Agile way of working, so I will take an extra look at this because I think there are some synergies that can be exploited, and it's interesting. I think that tools are a bit of a problem, but you can get away with it if you just say, well, that's the state of the art now, and it's going to be revisited every so often.
Yeah, definitely will be.
No, I just wanted to say something. Okay, I'm on
Wait a second for the microphone.
Okay, do I need?
I think we have a recording, so it's
Okay, so what I wanted just to say is that I'm on the other side of this story. So I'm a DevOps. I get my hands dirty every day. So the first question that I have for you is, for example, how do you want to teach Kubernetes? I mean, this certification, okay, I can see a very deep value, definitely. Can you sell it to companies? Definitely, this is what they're looking for. But in the end, the professional who is going to take this certification, okay, what is the depth of knowledge that it's going to have? Because this stuff, it's difficult stuff.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult
It
stuff.
is. Yeah,
so if you want
right.
to teach, I don't know, I just mentioned Kubernetes because it's the most complex probably topic on that list. But I mean, it implies that you know a lot of operating systems. It means that you need a lot of networking. It means that you need a lot. So you know, it's a very complex thing.
I know, and the way we're trying to solve it is actually really the depth and the depth of what we're doing here, because again, this is something that's supposed to be reachable by developers and by engineers. So we're not testing the people and really setting up a Kubernetes cluster. We're testing them and being able to use one if it already exists. So it's really like knowing the basic components of these tools and being able to use it to package the software and deliver and ship it, and how understand how this is going. In case we would really go into the details, for example, testing how to set up Kubernetes, we couldn't do it in this open way. It would have to be something that requires, and really hard requires, a lot of Linux knowledge before, because it goes very deep into all those details. So we can't ask a software developer to understand how certain capabilities on certain containers are set or not set. But that's not the point here. The point here is to understand how these tools are used, what's the context, and what's different to classic deployment, so to say, that might actually be already known by those candidates. And we recommend the candidates to have either a certification in the Linux area or in the development area, or operating or development area, to have some technical background, but not to the latest extent in all of those.
The main problem that I can see with this is that okay, so you get certification that you can use Docker or Kubernetes, okay? They're fairly easy. In a week, anyone can just learn enough to actually operate on a cluster. But being able to do a deployment, let's say, okay, and then maintaining a production infrastructure, which is part of the job of the DevOps, it's a completely different thing, right? So I can assure you this to you. If you work on a Kubernetes cluster, okay, doing a deployment, it's a matter of writing one command and having one configuration file. Then stuff starts to happen into your production environment, and the company you're working for, either your company or a client, whatever, okay, it's going to pretend that you make it work, because this is your job. This is what the DevOps is doing. This is part of. This is not even mentioning. I'm just talking about the tooling because this is your focus. I'm not even mentioning the principles of automating stuff and how this is impacting the operations inside the company, which is it's a higher level thing. So what I'm just saying is that I honestly don't think that the result of this certification, it is definitely something that companies will want, because enterprises especially, they like certifications, okay? That's fine. I'm just questioning whether the output of this is going to be of real value or not, which I honestly don't, I cannot see how this, done even in a year, can produce someone which is proficient with all these tools. I'm having like a background, I've been working in this field for years now, and I'm not proficient in all these tools, and this is my daily job. So it is a very, very complex thing. And you should consider it, especially if companies are expecting out of this certification, to be able to, to have professionals which are fully proficient and blah blah blah. It's not going to happen. That's all I'm saying.
Well, the question is, what kind of proficiency do you mean? Is it a person who really full-time manages these clusters and does nothing else in this technology, or is it a person who either is an operator or an administrator and adds this to what he's doing? Maybe not to the latest extent. This is definitely not going to be a all-over Kubernetes certification, and you're right, it would be hard to really put all this knowledge in there. It will be pretty high level compared to what you just outlined. And it's supposed to be an add-on to either a person who has a lot of Linux background and probably will go into this direction by knowing more about the tools, or by a person having a development background and learning those tools in order to, use it for their primary means.
Okay, all I'm saying is that you should probably set the expectations of the people taking this certification.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and setting those expectations also for potential employers, so they know what they're getting. And that's just transparency and being fair. You're absolutely right about this.
Yeah, maybe for me at that point can be
Daniel?
we should add something like essential. Like in the name and the way you present that is not that you have a full proficiency of all these tools, because we probably have Docker certification, Kubernetes. Each tool has its own certification, which is probably a lot of stuff. So there is no way in 1 week, 2 weeks of learning to learn all this stuff. There is no way. So probably the way we will communicate about this certification, you should be clear about what you can expect of knowledge that will be transferred to the candidates, because it's definitely not something that's okay, I'm DevOps, tools, engineer certified, and I know everything. I'm ready to go wherever. It's probably, I mean, it is a much bigger game around than what we can certify in 1 week or 2 weeks or study. That's probably is the communication, and what you say is definitely a good point, I guess.
So this is like a starter certification for DevOps engineers. Like you want to start being a DevOps and you get this to introduce you to all the tools and ecosystem, etc. And then you go in depth with each tool after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And another thing, the Linux Professional Institute does only this certification, or there are more?
We already have a lot of them.
Okay.
We have a 3-level program with, I think, seven currently exams that we have, but all in the Linux area, so this is pretty new.
So there's a Linux part, there's a whole Linux part, okay.
Exactly, the Linux part is existing, and in fact, with what we're doing here, we really need to get into a new audience. We need to know more about developers, and we need to go more into this area, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing these things like here, like all this feedback is very valuable for us, because we are learning a lot about audiences and from audiences that we haven't been involved with so much.
Why don't you just say, okay, we have all the Linux certification programs, and then you start a specific certification for each tool, instead of doing something generic at an higher level? Because if I take a Docker certification, or at least I will call it container certification, so you get instructed in how containerization works, in how it differs from other things.
It's a lot about this kind of micro certs and badging, for example. So you have to, for example, earn certain combinations in different areas of tools. It's a very different format. It's pretty hard to implement from our side. So this is pretty close to what we're doing in the Linux area. It doesn't mean that we're not discussing this. It doesn't mean that we might not consider doing something like this. Right now, we're using the same formats we're using for the other exams, because we can't just throw everything over. Like developing a new certification already is a challenge. And somehow finding a new format to do it is a challenge on its own. And linking this will probably not work. So this is applying the tools we have to a new area that seems to be important, that seems to be requested. As you mentioned, we get a lot of companies asking for this. And especially with companies asking for this, having an answer to it is better than not having an answer to it, because otherwise you end up with whatever comes up first.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can I not use this? It's the 5 of us. The only thing. What I'm just saying is, what I'm trying to say is that, a lot of companies are requesting for this. That makes totally sense. It reflects on our daily job. Okay. But what I see actually on the client side, or from what actually companies expect, is that you are actually fully proficient DevOps, which means that they expect that you are able to, first of all, automate the processes. That's the main thing, and it's not connected at all with the tooling. So that's like I would say 50% of the job. I've personally seen companies which were doing DevOps, not using any of this. It's true. I know it sounds awful, it was awful, but they were actually doing it, because they were doing it in a very clean way, in a very organized way, and they had everything fully automated and fully versioned, okay? And I've seen companies implementing all these tools, but having absolutely no idea how to use them, and so, therefore, not being DevOps at all. So, the suggestion is that maybe, together with this, I would start considering also part of on the principles, on the benefits, practices, exactly.
Or maybe even extend it on this exam a little.
It's a separate thing. I mean, because this is why do you need continuous delivery? What does that mean? And also, this is quite a complex topic, because it depends on the stack, it depends on the context, it depends on what is the kind of product. So that's one thing. A shared dictionary, because everyone is talking about, everyone is using the same words, but very often I have the feeling that I am not entirely sure of what the other person is actually talking about.
Using the same word doesn't mean the same thing.
So configuration management, I told.
There's not configuration management.
Yeah,
So
the meaning
That's
that
that's
we-
another thing. Another thing again is, as I mentioned, continuous deployment. How do you actually manage your code? What are the benefits of continuously shipping your software and how to do it like in the same way?
Yeah.
So, but this is entirely connected. But this practices together with this tooling, it's actually kind of starting to make, in my opinion, that's my personal definition of DevOps. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is what is making actually DevOps. If you just take the tooling, that's not going to work standalone. I think that's I don't know. That's just my feeling. Which doesn't mean that this is empty and this is like something that you should not do. I'm just saying that probably this is not enough. So maybe that's like.
Yeah, but at least you see it as one building block on this whole thing, and that's at least a good agreement. So that you're saying this is in this tools area, this is a relevance. And again, as we say on the name, we want to certify being able to use these tools. That's all we're aiming for. We don't dare to say we do DevOps in its whole scale and everything. So I think at least for this tool area, we have some kind of agreement.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
That's great.
I would like to say, so using the word DevOps put you as a certifier in a position where you will be reached by a lot of people that want to be certified, because DevOps is everywhere on job offers. Okay, so it makes sense that you are using DevOps word, but you are a Linux institute. Okay, so Linux sounds like theory, sounds like giving you the knowledge of what is under the hood. Okay, so be careful on mixing these two areas. Okay, following the marketing because of the money, and it is understandable, and being Linux, which is an open source project based on logic and theory, and sharing the very best knowledge that we have so far. Okay.
So it's again about expectations.
Yes, and marketing as well.
Yeah, sure, but it's as you say, it's also a way how we try to sell it. How much do we stress that you don't get the absolute Linux expert who's behind all these technologies, but that you get a person who understands which free tools are available and how to use them. And that's what we're aiming for.
Yes, probably the problem is it's almost the same in terms of expectation as it looks like there is a high demand in the market of this kind of stuff. The risk that I can see, and that people that start hiring these guys, and actually they fail about what they expected. And this can be a problem because if people start hiring guys that have to be certified, but they actually doesn't understand the job, this can be a problem in a long-term strategy.
Well, that will clean it up sooner or later.
Essentials or junior or tools it's really a marketing stuff that's mostly because there is a high market request, because probably people just starting hiring whatever. Oh, it's certified, get it. And after the first company, second company, they just hired dogs instead of fixing technicians. That's what became a problem if we are not clear and in what you are hiring.
I will just say, for example, I saw this a lot of times in the past, and nowadays and in the future I probably will see the same thing. That when I face, I work for a consultancy company, so when I face customers which are their internal persons, which are managing something like VMware, okay, they perfectly know what is VMware, the versions, how the command line works, how it starts virtual machines, things like that. But they doesn't know actually what's happening inside that. NSX, for example, the network stack of VMware, the new thing with NAS, things like that. People doesn't know what's happening in there. So the problem is, if you expect that someone which starts taking this certification arrives to you with a solid background like I already know Linux, I already know the concepts, so when you know those things, for example, you don't mind to take Docker or Kubernetes certification because you already know what's happening underneath. So if you already know what the components are doing, means that you could rewrite them, or at least you could theorize how to write them. And if you can do that, I wouldn't require you to know Kubernetes. You can learn it in like okay.
Yeah.
So when I do interviews or I speak with people, the first thing I try to do to understand if the conversation will be pleasant and if I will enjoy it is you are talking about tools like, oh, you know Ansible, right? Cool, okay. Or you are talking about that you know what's happening under that, because the real thing is knowing what's happening. For example, Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is a whole world of things, right? But it's a lot of theory. It's knowing how document database works, is knowing how the search engine works. If I hire a person who say is an Elasticsearch expert, I would expect for him to know.
But this is not about the Elasticsearch expert. This is about the person knowing how to query the existing data in case it's up and running.
Yeah, but I think that the point that he's trying to make, that I am trying to make as well, is that on some things it's pointless to just have a surface knowledge. It's absolutely pointless to have a surface knowledge on Kubernetes because there is no value in that. Absolutely no value in that, because that is easy, fairly easy. But it's not going to be useful in any production scenarios, because wherever you have Kubernetes exposed, it means that you will be required to go in depth. And by the way, there are no certifications about Kubernetes.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Just look at the other side. If you're unemployed and you're your first time and you are looking for a job, you have to apply to some company that doesn't know you, and you have no history, and that your CV is in a list of hundreds. And what we can expect and what we can hope is that if you present yourself with this certification, your CV can be in the higher list. It's not something that is give you the job. This is your own stuff when you talk. But if you know I can help someone to find a job and maybe to get a better job, is already part of the games. Is not from the company side. It's from the people that are looking for a job. The company are looking for that. I will try to explain that it's not. It's not just a point. The company. I mean, in a company, if you work, if you do a recruiting process, you know that certification doesn't guarantee anything. Doesn't matter any kind of certification. You also can be certified, Kubernetes, Docker certified. Doesn't really matter. I mean, people know stuff. People doesn't know, and the way you check it should be during your daily job or probably during the process. But also can be something that can help people.
Are you getting this request from a company or from people? Because I can tell you that I don't want people to start to take this and then be able to, and then they will think that they are proficient in this, or they might think that they can be hireable because of this. But the truth is, if I am an employer, okay, and I look for someone which is like a DevOps with a Kubernetes in the skill set, okay? This is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone who is able to get into the internals, because that's where the value is. Being able, again, to just issue 2 commands, it's literally the Kubernetes interface, it's literally 10 commands.
No.
Literally. There are no more, okay? So, being able to write down in a CLI these 10 commands, that's the only question that you can make. But there is no value in that. That's what I'm trying to say. I honestly think that there is no value there. And if I get, as a company, if I get an application from someone which is telling me that is able to actually use Kubernetes, and then I realize that it's just because they have this certification, but in fact they have no idea what is happening under the hood, that can be annoying on one side. And on the other side, this can be just a hook for people who has no job and who has no skills and who has blah, blah, blah. Okay? Who just try to market themselves higher, that's true, but there is no content. So you should be very, 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 like, I don't know, it's very easy to have like an empty certification. I don't want to do like an empty critics because I have no idea what is going to happen actually during your certification. So maybe it can be a super amazing thing, but the truth is that, I don't know, maybe you should, I think that it's very wide, even having a surfacing knowledge on this, it's very, very difficult to test because it's still a lot of stuff. One thing that I would add, it's public cloud, maybe. That's something I was thinking. If you want to add like AWS or Google Cloud or whatever, that's essential actually.
There is an area I think in here covering this, at least not a specific implementation, but I think we're going more for at least knowing which services exist, and the example of OpenStack, for example. So not to go for one of those, well, commercial vendors, so keep it pretty neutral, but at least that's in there.
Yeah.
Another thing that I would like to reply to, because being a DevOps, I think that it's not a thing that you do as your first job. Okay, you have to build a career as a developer, as a sysadmin, as a few things, because when you face a DevOps job, the first thing you will do is not setting up a cluster or something like that, but actually debug it, trace the processes. I would expect from a DevOps course like how to use trace on multiple machines, or how to do distributed tracing, or something like that. I would expect knowing the standards like open tracing, open containers, and all those things at an higher level, because you have to actually, if you face a JDK problem, a Java process which doesn't work, that's a DevOps job. Okay, it's like you have to know how the code works to fix the thing. If you are on PHP and you have to actually write a module to bind to the underneath API of the system, that's a DevOps job. That's doing the thing that other person in the team can do because they doesn't have the skills to manage the complexity of two systems that are connecting at that lower level. That's because in the past we had application servers or things like that which were very good for developers, because in that way sysadmins could just say, okay, I started the server, and developers, okay, I just deployed the WAR. But the world is not going in that direction. The world is going in a direction where teams are being more higher level and low level at the same time. There will be programmers which program at the higher possible layer, like functional programming and all those things, and there will be sysadmin working at lower level, writing their own tools, and DevOps which know both the world. So DevOps is not the first job. It's like you consolidate the experience you made with other teams, and you put yourself in a whole new challenge, because DevOps persons actually should be not just a smart person in the room when they are at work. That's not being presuntuoso, arrogant, but it's just that you have to solve the problem, okay?
Yeah.
And the problem can be solved by the others in your team. So you are there for that scope, and so you should not be the junior person, okay? That's just that. That's my opinion.
Okay, so we are almost close to an hour, so we already are 10 minutes over time. So thanks that you stayed with us for so long. Thanks for sharing your opinion.
Thank you.
And maybe see you at the booth outside, or if you'd like, feel free to speak about the main list, bring up those thoughts again. So.